Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Indic Researchers Forum. Our topic of discussion for today is combating and preventing corruption, decoding India's anti-corruption war. Today's session is organized by Indic Researchers Forum, a think tank that aims at bringing out quality research on geopolitics, national security, history, culture, and social sciences through a civilizational perspective. I am Satya Pulkuri, your host for the session. Currently, I am working as a research associate for the format. On behalf of Indic Researchers Forum, let's welcome Mr. Harjit Sandhu, retired IPS officer, counter-terrorism, law enforcement professional, Brussels. We are very grateful to have you, sir. Before we start the session, allow me to give a brief introduction about Sandhu, sir. Harjit Sandhu is a Indian police officer with 40 years standing in the professional and has at various time points in his career held high-level leadership positions in the field of law enforcement, counterterrorism, war crimes, homicide investigations, including political assassinations, investigation of financial crimes, as well as financing of terrorism and organized crimes, including armed trafficking networks and others. As an IPS officer, he served as a district police chief and was also a commanding officer of an armed battalion engaged with counterinsurgency operations, superintendent of police in the Central Bureau of Investigation, and deputy inspector general in the charge of counterinsurgency operations in Manipur state of India. At international level, he has assignments with Interpol General Secretariat for more than 3 years, United Nations Security Council for 2 years, and so has worked in United Nations World Food Programs, where he led investigation into international crime, drafting and editing reports, preparing policy guidelines, capacity building, and liaisons with other international organizations. As expert coordinator and spokesperson for 5 panels of experts for the UN Security Council in pursuance of resolutions 1306, 1343, 1395, 1407, and 1408 relating to Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Somalia. He state teams of informational experts monitoring cases of UN sanctions and the global arms trafficking networks. Reports prepared by Harjit sir jointly with the US agency FinCEN on Hawala and money laundering in 2000 has been used by law enforcement agencies as well as the courts all over the world. Before moving further, I request everyone to please switch on their videos and stay muted. During the course of presentation, feel free to ask any questions related to the session in the chat box. We will take up these questions during the interactive session. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Satya. You have given quite elaborate introduction. So I hope I could live up to that. And you spoke quite a lot of terrorism, war crimes, and whatnot. And then someone may say, last week I was speaking on Afghanistan, and before that, money laundering and drug trafficking, and then sometimes on this. So what do I have to do with the corruption part? So I will come to you. I think everyone will get to know during the presentation. I will start sharing my slides, and then we'll see whether I do have some credentials on the anti-corruption side or not. Okay, I'm going to allow my screen. Let's see if you can see.
Yes, sir.
So you see the first slide, right?
Yes. Yeah, we can see the slide, sir.
Okay, thank you. So today's focus is on combating and preventing corruption, decoding India's anti-corruption war. So this is all what you already introduced about me. So various stages, and over these last 40 years, traveled to 103 countries, moving from one place to another, and this is just a cycle of that for quick. These days, is easy to show in a picture rather than speaking on everything. And this one is the last one on anti-fraud, anti-corruption work with CBI, with Interpol, and the World Food Program of United Nations. So this, out of 40, around 17, 18 years exclusively on fraud and corruption. During CBI 92 to 97, I was in charge of handling corruption at higher places mostly. So which involved the senior cases like ministers and secretaries, joint secretaries and above, because that branch used to deal mostly with the corruption at higher places. So these are some of the clips from those days. So we come to that. What is corruption? People keep on talking of corruption all the time. So it depends on who is defining the corruption. The dictionary gives so many different definitions, long, elaborate definitions, but I think the most for a layman, it is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. So this is the one which is the real definition, which covers everything. Some other related words and definitions related to corruption: embezzlement, extortion, fraud, cheating, conflict of interest, lobbying, solicitation, nepotism, clientelism, state capture, criminal misconduct, influence peddling. These all words keep on appearing, but for a common man, bribery is what they talk of. When they say corruption, it is bribery. The offering, promising, giving, accepting, or soliciting of an advantage as an inducement for an action which is illegal, unethical, or a breach of trust. This inducement can take the form of all of this. Could be gift, loan, reward, etc. So how corruption starts? How people tend to become corrupt? How this entrapment happens? It is almost like this picture you are seeing on the screen. It starts with friendliness. Those people come and they start becoming your friend. From friendliness, it goes to flattery, to small gifts, to lunches during office time, then goes to dinners, sports events, then they invite you to clubs, and then mix business and pleasure. Then family favors, goes to larger gifts, and finally to money. And once it comes to the money stage, could be cash, could be deposited somewhere else in any form, then for the person, there are only two options. Either he gets Swiss bank accounts, lot of money there, or he goes here. He goes to the person, he or she goes to the jail. Why people indulge in fraud and corruption? Why they do? There are a lot of reasons for that. Some, the moment they get opportunity, they become corrupt. Then money problems, their own problems. One wife in one district, another wife in another city. So they have to maintain. Quite a lot of senior people had those problems. Then gluttony, greed, because greed has no end. As Mahatma Gandhi said, there is sufficient in this world for man's needs, but not for man's greed. Lack of accountability, nobody asks any question. Lack of or inadequate internal control, there is no control. And failure to encourage high integrity in public officials. And the most important, everyone does it syndrome. They say, oh, everyone is doing so, let me also do. And the prosecutors, the violators are not prosecuted. So as a result, they think everyone can do, so we can do. Corruption. Is it a part of culture in India? If you need to understand that, I think most of those people coming from Hindi belt or North India must have read this story, Namak Ka Daroga, at some stage, Munshi Premchand's. Written way back in mid-1930s, this story offers a penetrating insight into the Indian mindset, the allurement of bribe, the moral hazard, the businessman's corrosive ability to suborn the law. Right from mid 1930s, it is still the same situation. What Munshi Premchand wrote at that time. It is time to reread Munshi Premchand, those who want to work on anti-corruption. This is a paragraph translated from that story. Here, the father of that person, of the Daroga, is telling him, do not think about the government post. It is like a Peer's Mazar. Keep an eye on the offerings. Look for a job that yields an additional income. The monthly salary is like a full moon, which can be seen only once and then it only recedes. Whereas the additional income is like a running stream, always there to quench your thirst. Salary is given by man, additional income is God's gift in his bountifulness. So, this story is a great sociological insight into our broken collective moral compass. It demolishes quite a few of self-serving myths, which say that, like some people say, oh, till independence, India was a land of great innocence. Indians did not know bribe. Englishmen ran very vigorously supervised governance system, absolute nonsense. The English rulers, they did not set any ethical standards. This is again a myth. Most of them are looting themselves and they got enriched. And another method says one good, honest man can, once comes to power, she would see to it that no one took or offered a bribe or abused the governmental discretion. I think the Premchand story lays hollow all of these myths. Part of Indian culture. When we were growing up, I remember if somebody was corrupt, at least he was looked down upon. There was at least some social stigma attached to that. That is gone. There is greater social acceptance. So, what does it mean? Has India become a republic of scamsters? You see the cases right from, you have Sukram, Bangarappa, Harshad Mehta, Ketan Parekh, Telgi, Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi, the list goes on and on and on. I had my own personal myths about corruption when I joined CBI in 1992. I thought that the women are not corrupt. That myth was demolished very quickly. Then I thought South Indians were not corrupt. Corruption was only in North India. That was demolished very, very hugely because a lot of my first few cases happened to belong to South India. When I went to Interpol, I thought maybe the white man is not corrupt. So that myth also has been demolished over the years. And if we look at the corruption curve in India, now I come back to India, it is generally felt that about 20% of Indians are honest, regardless of the temptations, because this is how they are. They have conscience. And 30% are utterly corrupt. They will be corrupt whatever happens. They will remain corrupt. Whosoever is in government, whosoever is in power, they will remain corrupt. Then rest 50% are borderline. So those 50% borderline cases are the ones which we can try to bring it at least to our side, to the side of honesty. So coming back to that, it has become so widespread and has increased at a fantastic pace. It has become commonly accepted way of life. It's very common. Acceptance of gifts, bribes, commissions is very common. Payments by the politicians and bureaucrats are no longer frowned upon. Corruption has become a low risk and high paying activity. It makes no difference that the government increases the allocation for poverty alleviation schemes. What is the point of having schemes running into thousands of crores of rupees if the money is siphoned along the way. It does not reach where it should be reaching. In the last 10 years or so, India's corruption perception index has been more or less same. It goes a one rank above, one rank below, one rank again around. It stays in 80s only. So this indicates that nothing meaningful could be achieved. Poor people pay money to get basic services, which should be free. Rich corporates pay money in procurement and tendering. Then you have corruption in constructions, resulting in the roads, dams falling apart, bridges collapsing as the allotted funds are misused. There is hardly any area of activity that has remained absolutely free from the impact of corruption. You get married, you need a marriage certificate, you have to give to somebody, at least somewhere. You need a death certificate, which should be matter of, you should be given with full sympathy, but even for that, have to pay. Educational loan, something has to be paid. The traffic policeman stops you going into one-way traffic, of course that is bad, but again you're overspeeding, or under the table, whatever you do, a little cash would do the trick. Whether it was before demonetization or after demonetization, that quick cash, a little cash will help in all such cases. And if cash does not work, there are other means too. Doesn't have to be cash, because some people don't take cash. They don't take any physically visible thing which could be seized. So they want something else. Meal pass. You go there, or sex as a bribe. The famous case of Justice Arun Madan of Rajasthan High Court, 2002. This was sex for acquittal case. Dr. Sunita Malviya of Jodhpur, there was a case filed against her, and it was in lower court of illegal abortion case. And the registrar of Rajasthan High Court contacted her that, okay, we can get a favorable judgment. The only thing you need is you have to sleep with me as well as with the judge of the High Court, Justice Arun Madan. So finally, a lot of noise was created because they trapped the conversation, everything. So finally, what happened, that person had to leave. The judge had to leave, and the other registrars, the trial is going on against him. When I was in CBI, we had one such case where a Delhi police inspector, he wanted from a person as a bribe, he said, a bottle of whiskey in the guest house room with a female. So finally, we arranged trap. We organized one police, our own lady CBI staff, but we ensured her that we won't let him come near her, and we trapped it successfully. So it's not always corruption, this is also corruption. So you get something in return, and in this case, so they both thought the High Court judge as well as the registrar, they will have fun. So history of corruption in India, people think perhaps it is after independence and all. It's even Kautilya's Arthashastra mentions about corruption. The Manu's Code doesn't mention. India inherited this corruption legacy from ancient rulers who always expected some gift from their subjects, like Nazrana. Colonial system came, whether it was French, Portuguese, British, they all amassed huge wealth during their tenures in India. And they were known as white Nawabs or Maharajas. Example, Clive, Warren Hastings, when they went back, they were investigated in UK for amassing wealth so disproportionate to their known sources of income. After World War II, corruption raised its head everywhere. Then colonial system changed to our current democratic independent system, but the attitude did not disappear. The attitude of being corrupt, It rather percolates down with a vengeance. The value system has declined to such a low ebb that any exceptionally honest official behavior is viewed as a pleasant surprise. Then we come to political corruption. I'll cover a few categories different. Won't be able to cover every department, but a few which are more like prominent, visible. Political corruption. It corrupts the entire body politic, everyone. Its unethical effect demoralizes the entire fabric of the society, doomed in poverty, illiteracy, and backwardness in India. It has its roots in colonial and feudal order, has promoted political patronage, and the successive elections, parliaments, legislations have failed to checkmate its ugly and harmful effects. The problem seems to have become monolithic beyond easy repairs due to unconvincing opposition and political apathy of common man. Because common man feels, what should I do? Sanuki. Like in Punjab, they say Sanuki. And very often, bureaucracy and politicians, they both are in collusion in receiving huge kickbacks. I just put this one or two cases from almost every year just to make a list. I'm not going over this list, but you can see that it can be shared by the forum. This presentation can be shared. Look at every year, right from 1948, these are one after the other, a political case, and it doesn't stop. All the way up to today, it does not stop. Every year, the latest one, which is all over in the news, this Sachin Waze from Mumbai and Deshmukh, that Home Minister of Mumbai, then Kerala gold smuggling and Vijay Mallya, all these, they are currently ongoing. So the list it goes on and on and on. And the worst was even Adarsh housing scam. When after Kargil war, then there was that time something about those, coffins when they were procured, even there was some scam. Everywhere, petrol pump allotment, it continues, it doesn't stop. Some other aspects of the political corruption are, it rises and raises into two: criminalization of politics and politicization of criminals. Politicians become criminals or criminals become politicians. This is for everyone to see. Criminals have become lawmakers. Nearly half of the newly elected Lok Sabha members, just like in the latest one, nearly half of them, 43%, have criminal background. This is a 26% increase as compared to 2014. And of the 539 winning candidates analyzed by this Association of Democratic Reforms, which is formed by very senior, retired, honest people. So they say BJP has 116 MPs, Congress 29, JDU 13, DMK 10, TMC 9. So there is no party which is immune. Look at these two. This MP, she faces terror charges. This Congress MP from Kerala faces 204 criminal cases against him. And then from political, we come to bureaucratic corruption. There is no dearth of corrupt officials wheeling and dealing in bribery, extortion, nepotism, misuse, and abuse of official position. This has given rise to public perception, or rather misperception, that unless proven otherwise, a government servant in all probability is a corrupt official. This is what public feels. The moment they see a public servant, or what we call civil servants, they immediately feel, oh, this must be corrupt. According to one of former Central Vigilance Commissioner N. Vittal, corruption flourishes in Indian system because of 5 basic reasons: scarcity of goods and resources, red tape and complicated rules and procedures, lack of transparency in decision making, legal cushion of safety that assumes that everybody is innocent till proved guilty, and the most important, tribalism or biradari among the corrupt who protect each other. Politician protects the bureaucrat, bureaucrat protects the politician, and it goes on. And then it makes a very heady and deadly cocktail when there is a marriage between political corruption and bureaucratic corruption. You take case of all, I'm quoting these two cases because I investigated these cases during CBI time. Sukhram, so if you have a minister, you have a bureaucrat, Ronu Ghosh. If you have Bangarappa, then you have Alexander, the chief secretary. So CM, if you have, then chief secretary or some other secretary will be in collusion with that. And a very good modus operandi which was used in that first case, I've seen it myself. The minister will write not approved. Please see this carefully. This will be written as not approved. It is signed. So when it is signed, not approved, and afterwards some payment is made, then how you change it? Because if you cut it and put it or you erase it, it will be visible. So what they do is, when the money is paid, this E letter miraculously appears from somewhere. It is not there before that. Look at this again. So it is not approved, and E is inserted next to T, and it becomes note approved, which means the note which is written above by the previous person is approved, whereas previously it was not approved. So this happens when the bureaucratic and political corruption join hands. This is a real example from one of the cases. And 5 major players in this game of corruption in India are Neta, Babu, Lala, Jhola, and Dada. These are Hindi words. And for those who do not understand Hindi, they translate to this: corrupt politician, corrupt bureaucrat, corrupt businessman, corrupt NGO, criminal, or muscle man. So these 5 are the major players in the game of corruption in India. I'm not saying all 5 in every case are, but these are the ones. So these are the ones which actually appear at some stage or the other in most of the cases. Corruption at grassroots. Corruption in India has penetrated its soil, percolated down to the lowest levels of administration. It has permeated its culture, pervaded its economy, spread to academic institutions, poisoned its polity, and polluted its society. This is what Transparency International's observation was. And the same continues. Development schemes are now making the corrupt more corrupt, adding new layers of corruption and compelling common man to become a party to corruption. New shades of corruption have emerged on the rural scene, and they have cast their shadow on the grassroots, touching the likes of those who are struggling for their very survival. Corruption has been woven into the very warp and weft of the rural fabric. Warp and weft are like the two sides of a cloth when they do weaving. So that means corruption is weaved so strongly, intimately in the system, in the rural fabric. And for example, misuse of legislators' development funds, which MP leads. MPs are given funds for the development of their area, their constituency, but this money ends up going into their personal private accounts most of the time. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but you can see quite a major portion of that does end up going elsewhere. Corruption in judiciary. Logic demands that the highest chairs must have the soundest legs. This is what they say. By that measure, the judges ought to have impeccable moral character. But in India, judges are protected less by their sterling reputations than by an arcane law, the Contempt of Court Act. which prohibits raising any questions about judges or their actions. This has reduced talk of judicial corruption to a sullen whisper rather than a democratic debate. 8 Chief Justices out of 16 were corrupt. This was said not by me. This was said by former Law Minister Shanti Bhushan and lawyer Prashant Bhushan in their affidavits. So they said that out of 16, 8 were definitely corrupt, 6 were definitely honest, and about the remaining 2, a definite opinion cannot be expressed, whether they were honest or not. It is difficult to get documentary evidence of corruption in the higher places because no investigation is allowed against the judges. There is no disciplinary authority one can turn to, and even FIRs require prior permission from the Chief Justice of India. This was as per Supreme Court's decision in 1991 in Justice Veerasamy case. This is excerpts from that affidavit. I'm not reading, but this you can see these are the various Chief Justices in the affidavit by those 2 Bhushans. This is the details given that the first judge, after conducting inquiries into the 84 riots in a highly biased manner and giving clean check to Congress party, he became a Congress Rajya Sabha MP. The next one, Kian Singh, in a short tenure of 18 days, he passed a series of orders in favor of Jain exports and Jain Shuddh Vanaspati. These were later set aside. Justice Ahmadi, Bhopal gas leak, and later on he became lifetime chairman of the same hospital trust whose work he was taking. M.M. Panchi. Then A.S. Anand. I'm not going through details of each case, otherwise it will take much more time. Y.K. Sabharwal, again, while he heard Amar Singh Tape's case, his sons got land allotment in Noida. So, not only Supreme Court, if you go to high courts, these high courts, judges, there are so many cases rife with cases of abuse of law and corruption. Especially out of this, you see which came in the press and which few years back was discussed, Lord Justice Nirmal Yadav case. She was accused in the rupees 15 lakh cash at door scam, where the money was delivered to another judge's residence by mistake. So the bribe giver, rather than going to this judge's residence, went to another judge's place, and that is how they came to know that money was actually meant for the other one. So, of course, I'm not just going to speak on judicial corruption, otherwise could have gone through each and every case. So these 16 judicial commandments which the Supreme Court laid down in 1997, if every judge follows this, avoiding any action that erodes credibility, they should avoid this, they should not contest election, they should shun association with members of the bar, they should not let family member or relative practice in the same court, they should not accept gifts, they should not give opinions on this. So all these 16, if the judges start following these 16, then of course the judicial corruption can be controlled. But who will ensure this? There are 2 very good articles, those who are research oriented, I think they can refer to these 2 articles on judicial corruption. Corruption in Indian Judiciary by Yashveer Singh, a research scholar, because that is the time when people can really do good research when they are research scholars. Later on, they either take this side or that side. So this is a very nice article, Corruption in Indian Judiciary, very detailed he has gone. Similarly, research paper on corruption in Indian Judiciary, National and International Perspective by Hariram Anthil. So these 2 papers give a lot of details about various cases which were known there. And this shows how much we as a country are serious about ensuring this judges' accountability. The Judges' Standards and Accountability Bill which can ensure that judges are accountable. It was passed by Lok Sabha in March 2012, more than 9 years back, never taken up by Rajya Sabha since then. So, why not taken up? Don't know. If this bill was enacted and put in force, then perhaps there could be some action. Then comes to my own department, corruption in police. In police, the corruption, people talk more of those because they are visible. Corruption in police, we can put it as need-based or greed-based. I will come to that why it is need-based in some places. But the worst part of that is it brings a bad name to the policeman. If one policeman is corrupt, it brings bad name to the entire police force. And even other one, this bad image is even in the society. If you talk to any average person, non-policeman, he will say, oh, everybody in police is corrupt. The psychiatry science has got a policeman's hand syndrome. It is a term created for a psychiatric disorder whereby the person's hand gets twisted and it goes on the back. So its meaning is that a policeman, while talking to a person, puts his hand behind to accept money so that in front is not seen. So even a term has been created with that policeman's hand syndrome. Now, corruption in police, these are few I have tried to analyze according to my own experience. Demand of senior officials to be treated well. This is where it starts at lower level. The senior officers visit a place, or even without that, they are telling somebody that, oh, I need this one, and they want a special rate. So many times the police man at the ground will obviously take some for himself, some favor for the officer. But mostly, if he is asked to give one, then he will get so much for himself. On a variety of occasions, the senior police people want free buys or at ridiculously low rates. And then it extends to their friends, relatives, visiting colleagues, to whomever they wish to oblige. So this explicit or tacit demand of senior officials to be treated well. Second, expenditure at inspection time. In police, we have a lot of those inspection times coming, inspection of police station, inspection of district. At the higher you go, the more inspection. Some people call it jokingly at lower, why is it whitewash or color wash or eye wash? Because those people have to make speck and clean and all. And some of that definitely goes into that. Nobody asks where the money came from for doing all that polishing and whitewashing. Then sky is the limit in doing things for a whole lot of inspection. Inspections of higher formations also involve financial burden for police station. Then collection of money for a variety of functions and occasions. New Year, Diwali, boss's birthday, boss's wife's birthday, anniversary, family marriage. So the final one is one collection of money for handling routine professional function. This is where I have sympathy for these people who are there. I'm not condoning corruption by police, by the way. But I'm only saying that, see, this is the collection of money for handling routine professional functions. Police stations do not have sometimes stationery. A person comes under trial, or sorry, this person like who is detained has to be fed. Everybody's food doesn't come from home. Then the worst example is serving of summons. Take, for example, 45-degree, 47-degree temperature in Delhi. A constable is handed over a piece of paper which is summons from the court to go and serve it to somebody living in some outside place or even in some other states, to some God-forsaken places in the interiors where there are no roads. They are given this paper to serve this summon, but who will pay for that? How do these people go? At 45, 46 degree heat, they are expected to go there. How they go? No vehicle for constables. So how they go? Obviously, then they will be forced to do. I'm not, again, not justifying it, but what can they do? This is the only way then for them. Either we provide, if the system does not provide them those basic necessities, still for a lot of expenses, 30 paise per day something is given and all. I wish I could go into this more detail, but then have to go to other slides also. So that is the case where I say that this particular one, it pains me to see when those people, and when I was in CBI, I had to repatriate one constable to his parent cadre because he was sent to serve someone, and rather than serving the summon, he spent the night with that person, enjoyed hospitality, comes back from that village and says he could not find that. This cannot be condoned because this is exceeding too much. If it was little less, okay. If he is taking a lift from somebody, he has no transport, that is understandable. But not spending the night, enjoying the hospitality, and coming back and saying the person could not be found. Obviously, I had no option than getting that person repatriated. Then 2611 and corruption, this Bombay case. Whenever I think of that, my good friend Hemant Karkare, the chief of ATS, he was a good friend. Good friend. We had met many times in Vienna, and he was also planning to go on a UN posting few days before that. That is when he was talking. Even on that day, I was speaking to him when this news started coming on the TV that he has been seriously injured, and then he did not survive. Now, people do wonder that why the bullets penetrated this bulletproof jacket he was wearing. He was wearing a bulletproof jacket. People saw on TV. We all saw on TV how those different versions have come from police. PIL was filed, which was dismissed. The result, they say, the specifications in the tender notice did not require the jackets to give protection against bullets from AK-47 rifles or from self-loading rifles. Therefore, the state government ought to have invited tenders for supply of bulletproof jackets, which could block bullets from AK-47. So what type of bulletproof jackets were procured? Whether due to lowest quotation or due to corruption, I'm not aware of that. But I have a lot of friends in Bombay police. I have my batchmates, my seniors, my juniors, and often I have talked to that and never got clear response on this particular point, that why a bullet could pierce from a bulletproof jacket. So obviously there was something wrong somewhere, which easily we can interpret that probably there was somewhere at some stage corruption. Corruption in the Indian Army. It is the most respected the institution. I respect Indian Army way above any other department. But again, if you look at that, there was a 2010 report of the Controller and Auditor General. This report put holes in Army supply chain, saying that the entire supply chain management of rations has holes, and it hinted at widespread corruption and existence of cartels. Some years ago, an entire batch of IMA Academy pass-outs, they opted for ASC, that is a Army Supply Corps, which supply rations. So obviously the reason was where the butter is. Even in civil service, majority of the people, when they do not get foreign service and administration service, or even before, above police, revenue service comes, because the reputation is that corrupt customs and income tax, you have more money. It brings us back to Munshi Premchand's Namak Ka Daroga. Upar se income is more. About army, an army marches on its stomach. This is what Napoleon Bonaparte said. But the 1.13 million strong Indian army, the third largest in the world, marches largely on substandard food and rations well past their consume by date. I have many friends in army, and these are perpetual problems. So how the ration is procured, again that lowest quotation and all those. So obviously at some stage there is a corruption. When I was in CBI in those days, we were about to plan a trap of a senior army officer of Major General rank in Delhi, but the complainant last minute, the whistleblower last minute moved out. He was so scared. He said, I can't take enmity with army. They will kill me or they will get me killed. So the corruption is there also, which institution is relatively way better than all the other institutions as far as these ills of the society are concerned. But still there is corruption in that. So we can discuss every department. You can go one by one, but I leave other departments out. So what is the effect of this corruption? It undermines everything the law enforcement community works towards. It impoverishes whole communities and threatens the safety and security of many for the benefit of a very few. This is what a former Interpol General Secretary and a good friend, Ronald K. Noble, said. World Bank said corruption has been identified as among the greatest obstacles to economic and social development. It undermines development by distorting the rule of law and weakening the institutional foundation on which economic growth depends. India's poor are most subjected to corruption. This is what Transparency International said about India. The harmful effects of corruption are especially severe on the poor, who are hardest hit by economic decline, are most reliant on the provision of public services, and are least capable of paying the extra costs associated with bribery, fraud, and the misappropriation of economic privileges. This is what World Bank said. We come to good governance. We hear a lot of these words: good governance, clean government, shining, and all those things. A good governance is characterized as being participatory, accountable, transparent, efficient, responsive and inclusive, respecting the rule of law, and minimizing opportunities for corruption. So a good governance minimizes opportunities for corruption and respects the rule of law. And why corruption threatens good governance? Because it is a manifestation of institutional weakness, poor ethical standards, and insufficient enforcement. It drains the resources of a country. Corruption fuels transnational crime. Corruption threatens security and damages trust in systems, which affect people's daily lives. Corruption itself does not produce poverty, but it does have a direct and immediate impact on economic growth and good governance, which in turn raises poverty levels. History of anti-corruption. We have talked a lot of corruption, so it doesn't mean anti-corruption efforts have not been there. It started way back during British time, East India Company Act 1793. It prohibited making fortunes, but nobody cared. Clive, Hastings, all of them, they made fortunes. Indian Penal Code 1860, sections relating to bribery and corruption were put there, followed by Delhi Special Police Establishment Act 1946 after Second World War. This comes in the history of CBI. When people talk of history of CBI, then this Delhi Special Police Establishment Act is discussed. Prevention of Corruption Act 1947, then CBI was constituted, and then followed the debate over who is a public servant and what is a public duty. Whether chief minister or a minister and MPs, MLAs are public servants or not. When they go to seek votes, they say they are here to serve the public. I have heard it a million times since my childhood that I have come to serve the public. But when there is a case, we have cases. The moment CBI registers a case against any minister or MLA of corruption, then they say, oh, they are not covered under the definition of public servants. I'm not going into those details. In CBI circles, we discussed that at length in those days. Then the same history continuing with Santhanam Committee on Prevention of Corruption. Lal Bahadur Shastri, as Prime Minister, had set up this committee, which submitted its report, and this committee resulted into setting up of Central Vigilance Commission. Then Anti-Corruption, the Amendment Act of 64, and then Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, because the previous 47 did not cover few new provisions, so it was amended in 1988. Because the disproportionate assets, some people could get away under the previous legislation of 47. So this Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, it included the provision income earned from known and legitimate sources. Before that, this legitimate was not there. So basically, in a court of law, a person could come and prove that, oh, I earned this money from prostitution, which was illegal, but I did not pay tax. So as a result, this amendment was necessitated to have this known and legal sources of. Then came Central Vigilance Commission Act, CBI Draft Act. It is still ongoing. So how many anti-corruption watchdogs we have in India? We have Central Vigilance Commission, we have CAG, CBI, IB, EIB, Serious Fraud Office, SEBI, RBI, DIA, National Security Board, Parliamentary Standing Committees, and an excessive number of regulators in addition to state-level agencies. So many agencies, and still it is surprising that the government manages to lose sight of so many frauds and scams which go unnoticed. Why so many anti-corruption efforts have not been successful? This is a statement of a former director of CBI who said, Indian society and public life has been overrun by corruption for the simple reason that, irrespective of the party or parties in power, the governments of the day have at best sought to play it down, offered it tacit support, and at worst connived with the perpetrators. Somebody recently asked me this demonetization, has it reduced corruption or other crime? So I just hurriedly this morning, I put this slide added because it came in my mind that somebody was asking. So when Prime Minister declared on 8 November 2016 that to break the grip of corruption and black money, we have decided that the 500 and 1,000 currency notes will no longer be legal tender from midnight to night. Calling this demonetization a Mahayagna, fight against corruption, black money, fake notes and terrorism, and then Imandari ka Utsav, and it will be Parmanikta ka Parav, celebration of authenticity, so that every transaction after that is digital and what's not. And this was a movement for purifying the country. Did it happen? Prior to demonetization, this is RBI's figure, these are not guesswork. Rupees 17.74 trillion currency was in circulation, what they say CIC. Demonetization of 500 and 1,000 notes divested 15.44 trillion rupees of banknotes of their status of being legal tender, putting in motion a drastic move to take out as high as 86% of currency out of circulation. So basically, and Prime Minister had also said that those people corrupt and others who have got those money, those will become worthless papers with them after this. But did it become worthless papers? The response, anybody's response like mine is that no, because all of this money came back. As per Reserve Bank of India, again, all of that money has been accounted for. Mostly it came back, and rest of that which could not come back has been accounted for and justified where it is lying. So basically, There is no money that from corruption which has been rendered into worthless papers. How can we really combat corruption? This is the last part. We need whistleblowing. Somebody has to come out of that. The famous Sukhram case, which I handled in '96 with my team, we got is just a piece of paper from a whistleblower from that ministry. And the world does not still know the identity of that person because I have never disclosed till today. That is the real purpose of whistleblower. A whistleblower gives you information and that should be it. But that does not happen. So they are scared because the whistleblower's dilemma is that his identity or her identity will be known. The identity of those who expose corruption might be revealed either under the Right to Information Act or otherwise. People get to know. They tell. And what is the protection? There is no protection. Take, for example, this case of Stendra Dubey. His murder happened in 2003. He was an engineer in National Highway Authority of India. He gave that information. He was the whistleblower. He was murdered by the same very people against whom he gave information. The matter reached Supreme Court. People wanted Supreme Court to make a law. Supreme Court said no. Supreme Court's role is not to enact law. That is the work of the Parliament. Parliament has to do it. So finally, this Whistleblower Protection Act thing came into light. But if you look at Wikipedia even today, this clip is from today, it says status not yet in force. Then I looked around that status not yet in force. The bill received President's assent on 9 May 2014. We understand if there is no date of enforcement comes, it is the President's assent date is counted legally as the date of enforcement. However, this act has not yet come into force because amendments pertaining to safeguards against certain disclosure relevant to national security could not be incorporated, as the bill was passed on the last working day of the 15th Lok Sabha. So still it remains not in force. I don't know if since I checked it in the morning to today, to now it has been, I don't know. So we do need a national anti-corruption strategy. And Government of India assigned the task of drafting this to CVC, and CVC in association with Transparency International came up with a draft on 7 October 2010. So that draft addresses political corruption, administrative corruption. Sorry, it jumped quickly. Let me go back. Yeah, political corruption 8 recommendation, administrative corruption 11, and to discourage private sector participation in corruption 8 recommendations. Similarly, encouraging citizens to resist corruption, then social action and international cooperation. It does. So any effective anti-corruption strategy must be built on 5 key elements: increasing political accountability, strengthening civil society participation, institutionalizing restraint on power, improving public sector management, and creating a competitive private sector. So the concluding part, how do we make corruption-free India? What is the way forward? We need to focus on power and highlight the abuse of privileges. All of us need to examine ourselves as individuals to identify, minimize, and eliminate double standards and hypocrisy. We need to audit our systems and institutions to change the culture which breeds such corruption. There is need to re-examine our culture which has normalized corruption in its many different forms. We need to acknowledge the need for introspection on our acceptance of the abuse of power. The 7 Nolan principles of public life: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership by example should form the standards for holding public office. So, leadership by example, or what we say, tone at the top. In each department, the tone has to start at the top. The great leaders don't tell you what to do, they show how it is done, and that is what is required at the top of every department. But the problem is this. Yeah, that was kind of interesting, but why should I care about it? For my Punjabi friends, it comes back to Sanu ki. So, why should I care about that? That is the big problem. And so long as we all start caring about that, this problem will stay the same. It won't even be reduced. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I am available for any questions that you may have. Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you
back.
so, thank you so much, sir. We have some questions in the chat box. So, with your
Sure.
permission, we
Please.
can. Yes, sir. Thank you. Let's move to the Q&A interactive session. We have a first question from Lakshmi. How do we increase accountability at lower levels of an institution when corruption is rampant in higher ranks? Can need-based corruption be dealt with if there is an increased accountability, policies, or law governing those in the higher ranks? Yes.
You know, it comes back to my same what I concluded with that. The tone has to start at the top. Tone at the top is the problem. Is many times what happens that people who get dismissed or who get sanctioned, disciplined are the lower level people. It's not only in India, even outside, people, you always blame somebody, somebody has to be made scapegoat. So they simply fire somebody at lower level. So lower level accountability automatically comes if the higher level people are honest. As I said, 20% and 30%, rest 50 is in the middle. So all, even otherwise, all bureaucrats of any level, from the lowest one, from peon up to the top, they fall in these three categories, whether it is corruption or anything else. Some who are absolutely good, they give their worth whatever salary they are getting. They are the top. They don't change with whosoever is the political power or other. The second one, they see how are the bosses or the political powers and they change. And the third one is those who are absolute scoundrels, to put it that way. They want. So those are the people who need to be shunted out at the earliest, as quickly as possible. So I hope I have addressed, because you cannot only take action and ensure accountability at the lower levels. You have to. And you, see, it's not that even I know of cases where a senior level person is corrupt, but there was somebody scrupulous at lower level. Take the case of, I give you real example, Bangarappa case. Bangarappa case, classic computer case, it started with the chief secretary on 31st March, when the financial year is closing, wrote a handwritten note, sent it to Chief Minister. Obviously, Chief Minister asked, he sent, and it is approved. When it comes down for implementing, it has to go down the line, and a deputy secretary level officer put, honest person, he put his full comment that this whole process is not correct. We need to. So he was the only one. He was our witness, but he was the only one who was not questioned as a suspect. So people can do. You can ensure, and mostly it comes from within also. No? You can't always enforce accountability. For some people, it comes is inbuilt. It comes from within. They are honest because they are honest. That's it. Even if like Namak ka Daroga, even if the father is saying that you should make some money from So those who are, some who are honest, they are honest. Others are made honest because they do not get opportunity to become dishonest. Okay?
All right, sir. Next, we have three
Thank you.
questions from Pratiti Srivastava. The
Yeah.
first question: what would be the impact of recent amendment of AIS Conduct Rules 1968 related to the acceptance of gifts by foreign dignitaries, relatives, and friends on the fight against the corruption?
Acceptance of, is question over?
Yes, sir. The first question is over.
Acceptance of gifts has always been a subject not only in India, everywhere. Because the acceptance of gift, some gifts you cannot refuse because it is a cultural thing. In those areas, like even in India, Northeast, if somebody, when they come to meet a district officer or a senior officer, they always go with something, like they go with a small present. From their field, they will catch some fish, one. They are holding it and they keep walking. This has been during British time. Or from their farm, they pick up one chicken and they put a sort of jacket and holding it and live chicken, they bring it. So there the emotions are a lot. So in those type of cases, many times you thank them and give it, and just like because the dilemma is, if you say no, then you are hurting their sentiments. So you have to find a way out. Jokingly, in America, they say that you can take a gift of anything that you can drink within 24 hours. I'm not saying it is good, but internal joke is that so that it doesn't stay there. If somebody is bringing something a minor, but again, it's a gift, the value of the gift. My very first posting way back in 1983 was in Andamans as an unmarried. I joined there. I was in the guest house, and in the evening, that person I called, the one who cooked, who was supposed to cook, it was my first day. He has a big box, like all vegetable food, everything is there. I said, oh, I was going to send you to market to buy. That was in middle Andamans. And how you, he said, no, this has come from Jashri Timber Products, Birla's company, the timber company there. I said, but why they, he said, no, all, every officer has been taken. It is going on since long. He does not know when it started. All ration comes from them. I said, okay, call their general manager. I called him and gave him dressing down. I said, lift it on your head and take it. It happened with a few others. I can give a lot of examples of that. So you have to set that tone. But yes, little gift is okay. Acceptance of small gift, which is in UN, you have to declare. They say anything which is more than $25 has to be declared to ethics department under code of conduct. But this question, if it is related to those foreign contributions, of course, there it is. I was on a side seeing here. I think, let me see, Foreign Contribution Act, because that is for acceptance of gifts by foreign dignitaries. I'm just reading. Will increasing, is it the same part of question or you are going to ask again?
No, sir. Then the next question is different.
Okay.
Yes.
See, okay, that is fine. Then I will say that so long as it is accounted for, we in UN, I can put it that in India, I don't know if that time we had something like that. Few things were in gray area. But in UN, definitely we have this one that when you get a gift, if it is of more value, it is you fill in a form, you give it physically to the ethics office, and then at the end of the year they auction it. All of that you can buy yourself at very nominal price. It becomes that money goes to the organization's funds. So it is accounted for, because in some places saying no is, and some people who are religiously honest, I will not say religiously honest, they are like they outwardly they try to show that they are honest. I was in one investigation in Lebanon and I had a investigator from one of the first world countries with me, and they ask for tea or coffee. In that country, you don't refuse tea or coffee. If you say you refuse, you have to at least take water. But you can't refuse. That is insult. But this my investigator with me will not budge, saying that their police training is that you cannot take anything from anybody's house, is a witness or something. So you it's not only in the spirit, it should not only in the wording, it should be in the spirit. When such legislations are enacted, is basically the spirit is to stop corruption. It's not to embarrass the person who brings it for you. Like anyone who is posted in Manipur will agree with me that it's very difficult to refuse if somebody brings those like 10 rupee, 15 rupee item for you. You can compensate the person in a different way. You can give that much equivalent money to someone, and when you go there, but it's very difficult to always as a clearly say no, we do not accept. That is why the gift policy that you declare, and UN says that if it is below 25, even then you can keep, but above that you have to declare. Okay, thank you.
All right, sir. The next question, will increasing privatization of publicly owned service sector will create new challenges for anti-corruption wing?
I think rather than challenge, it will help, in my opinion, because then the public services will also have a competition. Because then they will know that why privates can give a better service than public. I have been always in public service at various levels in India and abroad. But if it is privatization of publicly owned service sector, definitely, because private sector, they take money, they give service. They take money, they give equivalent service. Public sector takes money, do not give service. You go to bank, for example. Why people more and more are shifting to those HDFs, ICIC type of banks rather than going to State Bank of India, Bank of Central Bank and all. You go there and you yourself understand. So for me, it is a healthy competition. It will not have more challenge. It will have challenge for the public sector, but it will not have challenge for anti-corruption wing. Is of course they do not come under the purview. That is the point. That is the challenge. So then a suitable amendment will have to be, because they are not covered under this anti-corruption regime. That is the only challenge. But the services will become better. I hope I have addressed your question.
Yes, sir. The next question.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The recent amendment of Companies Act 2013 to removal of the corporate donation caps and a mandatory disclosure of beneficiaries, will this amendment fuel the corruption crisis in India?
See, again, yes, definitely it will. But again, if it is properly accounted for, if it is accounted for, then the crisis will not be further fueled. Only problem happens when it is not accounted for. Take, for example, the infamous Jain Hawala case. I don't know, you may be very young that time when Jain Hawala case happened. Vineet Narayan, when he went to court, and then that case, more than 100, I think 114, I'm forgetting 114 or 144 beneficiaries from all political parties, they had received money from that. So in that case, we investigated. I was one of the investigators. I talked to several politicians, some very high, some who you can say the top level of that time or subsequent times. When you talk to them, some of them did admit, yes, I took the money, but I took it for the party funds. Where is that entry? Sorry, we do not enter those details. One very high level politician, he said, yes, I took this. I took, but this one was I immediately went to the party office and I deposited it in the party accounts, which there is no record of that. So anything, if it can be accounted for, the whole issue is, see, even if there is, like with this amendment, yes, okay, you can say, when there is a mandatory disclosure of beneficiaries, so you have the list of beneficiaries, and how much money or donation or contribution is coming, if it is accounted for, then that is not for me to comment, because then there is no problem. The whole problem is when there is no accounting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, last question, on to our last question. Recently, the government has amended the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act to counter the inflow of irregular funds. So, do you think is it enough to combat the corruption threat arising from outside India, or should the government altogether ban foreign funding? How can India counter the rising threat of irregular funds received by NGOs operating in the country?
Ah, very difficult, very difficult to regulate. I start with the last part, because NGOs, lot of NGOs are doing very good work, and some of the NGOs are not doing good work. Some NGOs are created just to make some money. Some are genuinely interested in doing. It's not, even though the amendments and acts are new, but these things have been going on long. So many times it is that allegations have been there, like some of that has been used. Even in Northeast, we have been, including me in those days, we have been saying that this foreign funding fuels counterinsurgency in that area. In 19, that was in 1987 or 88, Seventh-day Adventist Church was being looked into. I was SP of one of the districts when some query had come from center to look into that their activities are there and all. We were not even aware of that funds were coming at local level. We were not aware of, but these allegations have been that time also. Idea is that these, I'm not a like financial type of expert in that sense, that on the funding, how, which side the legalizing part of that, how good or effective it is. But the whole summary of that and the central idea is to have proper accounting. If they have accounting, corruption is not only, terrorism is also a lot of money that if you see, many years back, earthquake happened in Upper Kashmir, including the two sides of Kashmir, some Pakistan occupied Kashmir and some Indian side Kashmir. There was many years back, I was in Holland, where we all very proactively collected money and sent it from one of our think tanks, which does not get any funds, but rather we pay as a membership fees, and it runs on that. It is Foundation for Critical Choices for India. We sent some money, and subsequently, during my own job, I came to know that some of the money which was collected by those people were actually used for funding terrorism across the border. So how you feel that when there is a natural disaster or something, people have an urge to immediately come forward, whether it is from agencies, whether it is individual donations, but where it goes. So that all these type of new amendments are to stop that, or at least to put a lid on that, to keep a check on that, have a proper accounting system, auditing. If any fund, you have a fund which is beyond audit, then obviously then you can't ask any question. It could be any fund. It could be NGO's fund, or it could be my fund, your fund, anybody's fund. It should be available for auditing. Okay? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Seeing no other questions, let's end the interactive session. And thank you so much for patiently answering these questions, and also the thought-provoking presentation which you gave. Like when you talk about that not approved to not approved, and those 5 years,
Yeah,
and the levels of corruption and the anti-corruption movements. Basically, the recommendations, like all
yeah,
these things we have learned from your experience, and we are really lucky to share it. Like you have shared this with us, and
yeah.
we were not aware of these facts, like many facts which you have shared. So, thank you so much for spending your valuable time and sharing your valuable insights. On behalf of Indic Researchers Forum, we extend our warm regards, and it was a great pleasure having you, sir. It was indeed an enlightening session, also. Uh, on this note, let's end today's session with your permission. So, we hope you all have enjoyed the session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Satya. Thank you, Yashas. Okay. And you can use my presentation.